Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to the Claverings by Anthony Trollope. I'm reading it in this old illustrated Dover trade paperback, and we are up to chapter 14, in which our hero, Harry Clavering, is about to meet some Eurotrash. Who's up for meeting some Eurotrash? This is the chapter called Count Pateroff and His Sister. After an interval of some weeks, during which Harry had been down at Clavering and had returned again to his work at the Adelphi, Count Pateroff called again at Bloomsbury Square, but Harry was at Mr. Beilby's office. Harry had once returned the Count's visit at the address given in Mount Street. Madam was at home, said the servant girl, from which Harry was led to suppose that the Count was a married man. But Harry felt that he had no right to intrude upon Madam, so he left his card. It's not a wife. Wishing, however, really to have this interview, and having been lately so elected at a club of which he was rather proud, he wrote to the Count asking him to dine with him at the Beaufort. That's the club that Harry's now a member of. Notice, he is straying from the prosaic world of the Burtons. He is wearing nice clothes. He is a member of a fashionable fast-set club. He explained that there was a stranger's room, which Pateroff knew very well, having often dined at the Beaufort, and said something as to the private little dinner for two, thereby apologizing for proposing to the Count to dine without other guests. Pateroff accepted the invitation, and Harry, never having done such a thing before, ordered his dinner with much nervousness. The Count was punctual, and the two men introduced themselves. Harry had expected to see a handsome foreigner, with black hair, polished whiskers, probably a hook nose. Oh, Tony, don't ever change. By which I mean change as fast as possible. 40 years of age thereabouts, but so got up as to look not much more than 30. But his guest was by no means such a man of that stamp. Accepting that the Count's age was altogether uncertain, no correctness of guess on that matter being possible by the means of his appearance, Harry's preconceived notion was wrong in every point. He was a fair man, with a broad face and very light blue eyes. His forehead was low, but broad. He wore no whiskers, but bore on his lip a heavy mustache, which was not gray, but perfectly white. White it was with years, of course, but yet it gave no sign of age to his face. He was well made, active, somewhat broad in the shoulders, though rather below height. But for a certain ease of manner which he possessed, accompanied by something of restlessness in his eye, anyone would have taken him for an Englishman. Because I guess Englishmen don't have a certain ease of address. And his speech hardly betrayed that he was not English. Harry, knowing that he was a foreigner, noticed now and again some little acquired distinctness of speech which is hardly natural to a native, but otherwise there was nothing in his tongue to betray him. "I am sorry that you should have had so much trouble," he said, shaking hands with Harry. Clavering declared that he had incurred no trouble, and declared also that he would be only too happy to be taken to any trouble in obeying the behest of his friend Lady Ongar. Had he been a Pole, as was the Count, he would not have forgotten to add that he would have been equally willing to exert himself for the view of making the Count's acquaintance. But being simply a young Englishman, he was much too awkward for any of that courtesy. The Count observed the omission, smiled, and bowed. Then he spoke of the weather, and said that London was a magnificent city. Oh yes, he knew London well, had known it these 20 years, had been for 15 years a member of the Travellers. He liked everything English except hunting. English hunting he found to be rather dull work, but he liked shooting for an hour or two. He could not rival, he said, the intense energy of an Englishman who would work all day with his guns harder than his plowing with his plows. Englishmen sported, he said, as though more than their bread, as though their honor, their wives, their souls depended on it. It was very fine. He often wished that he was an Englishman. Then he shrugged his shoulders. Harry was very anxious to commence a conversation about Lady Ongar, but he did not know at first how to introduce her name. Count Pateroff had come to him at Lady Ongar's request, and therefore, as he thought, the Count should have been the first to mention her. But the Count seemed to be enjoying his dinner without any thought of either Lady Ongar or her late husband. At this time he had been down to Ongar Park on that mission which had been, as we know, futile, but he said no word of that to Harry. He seemed to enjoy his dinner thoroughly, and made himself very agreeable. When the wine was discussed, he told Harry that a certain vintage of Moselle was very famous at the Beaufort. Harry ordered the wine, of course, and was delighted to give his guest the best of everything, but he was a little annoyed at finding that the stranger knew his club better than he knew it himself. Slowly the Count ate his dinner, enjoying every morsel that he took with that thoughtful, conscious pleasure which young men never attain in eating and drinking, and which men as they grow older so often forget to acquire. Thanks, Tony. Thanks a lot. How many dozens of accounts do we have of people dining with the famous novelist Mr. Trollope and commenting to themselves in their diaries once they get home that he bolted his food like a pig at a trough? But thanks for the sententious advice. But the Count never forgot any of his own capacities for pleasure, and in all things made the most of his resources. To be rich is not to have 1 or 10,000 a year, but to be able to get out of that 1 or 10,000 all that every pound, every shilling, every penny will give you. After this fashion, the Count was a rich man. "You don't sit after dinner here, I suppose," said the Count, when he had completed an elaborate washing of mouth and mustache. I like this club because we who are strangers have a charming room of our own for smoking. It is the best club in London for men who do not belong to it." And why does Count Pateroff not belong to it? When he's been there for years and knows it well and knows everyone there? Probably because he's not their kind of member. It occurred to Harry that in the smoking room there would be no privacy. 3 or 4 men had already spoken to the Count, showing that he was well known, giving notice, as it were, that Pateroff would become a public man when once he entered a public space. To have given a dinner to the Count and have spoken no word to him about Lady Ongar would by no means be satisfactory to Harry's feelings, though, as it appeared, it might be sufficiently satisfactory to the guest. The Count has left his card twice now. Doesn't appear to even care about whether or not Lady Ongar comes up. Very odd. Harry therefore suggested 1 bottle of claret. The Count agreed, expressing an opinion that the 51 Lafitte was unexceptional. The 51 Lafitte was ordered, and Harry, as he filled his glass, considered the way in which his subject should be introduced. He's obviously going to have to do it himself. Not that any of you are paying attention to me. But I'm going to soldier on here. "You knew Lord Ongar, I think, abroad?" "Oh, Lord Ongar abroad? Oh, yes, very well. And for many years here in London, and at Vienna, and very early in life at St. Petersburg. I knew Lord Ongar first in Russia when he was attached to the embassy as Frederick Courton. His father, Lord Courton, was then alive, as was also his grandfather. He was a nice, good-looking lad then." So Count Pateroff is probably older than he looks. "As regards his being nice, he seems to have changed a good deal before he died." This the Count noticed by simply shrugging his shoulders and smiling as he sipped his wine. "By all that I can hear, he became a horrid brute when he married," said Harry energetically. "He was not pleasant when he was ill at Florence," said the Count. "She must have had a terrible time with him," said Harry. The Count put up his hands and again shrugged his shoulders and then shook his head. "She knew he was no longer an Adonis when he married her." "An Adonis? No, she did not expect an Adonis, but she thought he would have something of the honor and feeling of a man." "She found it uncomfortable, no doubt. He did too much of this, you know," said the Count, raising his glass to his lips. And didn't do it with 51 Lafitte, I can tell you that. That was Ongar's fault. All the world knew it for the last 10 years. No one knew it better than Hugh Clavering." "But," said Harry, and then he stopped. He hardly knew what it was that he wished to learn from the man, though he certainly did wish to learn something. He had thought that the Count would himself have talked about Lady Ongar and those Florentine days now, but this he did not seem disposed to do. "Shall we have our cigars now?" said Count Pateroff. "One moment, if you don't mind." Certainly, there is no hurry." "You will take no more wine?" "No more wine. I take my wine at dinner, as you saw." "I want to ask you one special question about Lady Ongar." "I will say anything in her favor that you please. I am always ready to say anything in favor of any lady, and if needs be to swear it. But anything against any lady, nobody ever heard me say." Harry was sharp enough to perceive that any assertion made under such a stipulation was worse than nothing. It was as when a man, in denying the truth of a statement, does so with an assurance that on that subject he would consider himself justified in telling any number of lies. "I did not write the book, but you have no right to ask the question, and I should say that I had, even if I had not, even if I had," so to speak. Pateroff was speaking of Lady Ongar in this way, and Harry hated him for doing so. Because he's not going to get anything truthful out of the man. He's pretty much telling him that. "I don't want you to say any good of her," he said, "or any evil." "I will certainly say no evil of her. But I think you know that she has been most cruelly treated." Well, there is about 7,000 pounds a year, I think. 7,000 a year. Not francs, but pounds. We foreigners lose ourselves in amazement when we hear about your English fortunes. 7,000 pounds a year for a lady all alone in a beautiful house, a house so beautiful, they tell me. What has that to do with it? Said Harry, whereupon the Count again shrugged his shoulders. What has that to do with it? Because a man was rich, he is justified in ill-treating his wife? Did he not bring false accusations against her in order that he might rob her after his death of all that was of which you think so much? Did he not bear false witness against her to his own dishonor? She has got the money, I think, and the beautiful house. But her name has been covered with lies. What can I do? Why do you ask me? I know nothing. Look here, Mr. Clavering, if you want to make any inquiry, you had better go to my sister. I don't see what good it will do, but she will talk to you by the hour together, if you wishes. Let us smoke. Your sister? Yes, my sister, Madame Gordeloup is her name. She has not Lady Ongar mentioned my sister? They are inseparables. My sister lives in Mount Street. With you? No, not with me. I do not live in Mount Street. I have my address sometimes at her house. Madame Gordeloup. Yes, Madame Gordeloup. She is Lady Ongar's friend. She will talk to you. Will you introduce me, Count Pateroff? Oh, no, it is not necessary. You can go to Mount Street, and she will be delighted. There is the card, and now we will smoke. Harry felt that he could not, with good breeding, detain the Count any longer, and therefore, rising from his chair, led the way into the smoking room. When there, the man of the world separated himself from his young friend, of whose enthusiasm he perhaps had had enough, and was soon engaged in conversation with sundry other men of his own standing. Harry soon perceived that his guest had no further need of his countenance, and went home to Bloomsbury Square by no means satisfied with his new acquaintance. If you're not satisfied by him, just wait and see how you feel about his sister. On the next day he dined at Onslow Crescent with the Burtons, and there he said nothing about Lady Ongar or Count Pateroff. He was not aware that he had any special reason for being silent on the subject, but he made up his mind that the Burtons were people so far removed in their sphere of life from Lady Ongar that the subject would not be suitable in Onslow Crescent. It was his lot in life to be concerned with people of two classes. He did not at all mean to say, even to himself, that he liked the Ongar class better, but we know he does. But still, as much was his lot, he must take it as it came and entertain both subjects of interest without any commingling of the one with the other. Of Lady Ongar and his early love he had spoken to Florence at some length, but he did not find it necessary in his letters to tell her anything of Count Pateroff and his dinner at the Beaufort. Nor did he mention the dinner to his dear friend Cecilia. On this occasion he made himself very happy in Onslow Crescent, playing with the children, chatting with his friend, and enduring with good grace Theodore Burton's sarcasm, when that ever-studious gentleman told him that he was only fit to go about tied to a woman's apron string. Which is a comment, it's certainly a comment on what we've been told, that Harry is much better with women than with men. But I bet it's also a comment on the fact that he isn't often at the Adelphi. He isn't often pursuing his business. On the following day, about 5 o'clock, he called at Mount Street. He had doubted much as to this, thinking that at any rate he ought to in the first place write and ask permission. You do not need permission to talk to Sophie Gordeloup. She will talk to anyone at any time. But at last he resolved that he would take the Count at his word, and presenting himself at the door, he sent up his name. Madame Gordeloup was at home, and in a few moments he found himself in a room in which the lady was sitting, and recognized her whom he had seen with Lady Ongar at Bolton Street. She got up at once, having glanced at the name at the card, and seemed to know all about him. She shook hands with him cordially, almost squeezing his hand, and bade him sit down near her on the sofa. She was so glad to see him for her dear Julie's sake. Julie, of course, he knew, was at Ongar Park. Oh, so happy, which, by the by, he did not know, and would be up in the course of a week. So many things to do, of course, Mr. Clavering, the house and the servants and the park and the beautiful things of a large country establishment, but it was delightful, and Julie was quite happy. No people could be more unlike to each other than this brother and his sister. No human being could have taken Madame Gordeloup for an Englishwoman, though it might be difficult to judge, either from her language or her appearance, of the nationality to which she belonged. She spoke English with great fluency, but every word uttered declared her not to be English. And when she was most fluent, she was least incorrect. She was most incorrect in her language. She was small, eager, and quick, and appeared quite as anxious to talk as her brother had been to hold his tongue. She lived in a small room on the first floor of a small house, but it seemed to Harry that she lived alone. But he had not been there long before she had told him all her history, explaining to him most of her circumstance. That she kept back something is probable, but how many are there who can afford to tell everything? Her husband was still living, and he was in St. Petersburg. He was a Frenchman by family, but had been born in Russia. He had been attached to the Russian embassy in London, and was now attached to diplomacy in general in Russia. She did not join him because she loved England oh so much, and perhaps her husband might come back again some day. She did not say that she had not seen him for 10 years and was not quite sure whether he was dead or alive. But had she made a clean breast of all things, she might have done so. She said that she was a good deal still at the Russian embassy, but she did not say that she herself was a paid spy. Nor do I say so now, positively. Right. But that was the character given to her by many who knew her. She called her brother Edward, as though Harry had known the Count all his life, and always spoke of Lady Ongar as Julie. She uttered one or two little hints which seemed to imply that she knew everything that had passed between Julie and Harry Clavering in early days, and never mentioned Lord Ongar without some term of violent abuse. Horrid wretch, she said, pausing over the R's in the name she had called him. It began, you know, from the very first. Of course he had been a fool. An old roué is always a fool to marry. What does he get, you know, for his money? A pretty face. He's tired of that as soon as it's his own. Is this not so, Mr. Clavering? But other people ain't tired of it, and then he becomes jealous. But Lord Ongar was not jealous. He was not man enough to be jealous. Horrid wretch. She then went on telling many things of which, as he listened, almost made Harry Clavering's hair stand on end, and which must not be repeated here. And we can assume those are detailed about their married life. She herself had met her brother in Paris, and had been with him when they encountered the Ongars in that capital. According to her showing, they had all of them been together nearly from that time to the day of Lord Ongar's death. But Harry soon learned to feel that he could not believe all that the little lady told him. Edward was always with him. Poor Edward, she said. There was some money matter between them about cards. When that wretch got to be so bad, he did not like parting with his money, not even when he'd lost it. And Julie had been so good always. Julie and Edward had done everything for the nasty wretch. Harry did not at all like this mingling of the name Julie and Edward, though it did not for the moment fill his mind with any suspicion as to Lady Ongar. It made him feel, however, that this woman was dangerous, and that her tongue might be very mischievous if she talked to others as she did to him. As he looked at her, and being now in her own room, she was not dressed with scrupulous care, and as he listened to her, he could not conceive what Lady Ongar had seen that she should have made a friend of her. Her brother, the Count, was undoubtedly a gentleman in his manners and his way of life, but he did not know by what name he should call this woman, who called Lady Ongar Julie. She was altogether unlike any ladies whom he had ever known. You know that Julie will be in town next week? No, I did not know when she was to return. Oh, yes, she has business with these people in South Audley Street on Thursday. Poor dear, those lawyers are so harassing. But when people have £7,000 a year, they must put up with lawyers. As she pronounced those talismanic words, which were to her almost celestial, Harry perceived for the first time that there was some sort of resemblance between her and the Count. He could see that they were brother and sister. I shall go to her directly she comes, and of course I will tell her how good you have been to come to me, and Edward has been dining with you, how good of you. He told me how charming you are. Harry was quite sure she was fibbing about that, and that it was all so pleasant. Edward is very much attached to Julie, very much, though of course all that was mere nonsense, just lies told by that wicked lord. Bah! What did he know? Harry by this time was beginning to wish that he had never found his way to Mount Street. Of course they were lies, he said roughly. Of course, mon cher, those things always are lies, and so wicked. What good do they do? Lies never did do any good, said Harry. Does that apply to lies of omission, Harry? Does it apply to secrets, Harry? To so wide a proposition as this, the madam was not prepared to give an unconditional assent, because Sophie Gordeloup is made of lies, and therefore she shrugged her shoulders once again, looked like her brother. Ah, she said, Julie is a happy woman now. £7,000 a year. One does not know how to believe it, does one? I never heard the amount of her income, said Harry. It is all that, said the Franco-Pole energetically. So I guess Tony doesn't have any trouble telling us where she comes from now. He's pretty sure. Every franc of it, besides the house. I know it. She told me herself. Yes, what woman would risk that, you know, and his love, you may say, as good as gone. Of course they were lies. I don't think you understand her, Madame Gordeloup. Oh, yes, I know her so well, and love her. Oh, Mr. Clavering, I love her so dearly. Is she not charming? So beautiful, you know, and so grand. Such a will, too. That's what I like in a woman. Such a courage. She never flinched in those horrid days, never. And when he called her, you know what, she only looked at him, just looked at him, miserable object. Oh, it was beautiful. And Madame Gordeloup, rising in her energy from her seat for the purpose, strove to throw upon Harry such a glance as the injured, insulted wife had thrown upon her foul-tongued, lying lord. She will marry, said Madame Gordeloup, changing her tone with suddenness that made Harry start. She will marry, of course. Your English widows always marry if they have money. They are wrong, and she will be wrong, but she will marry. I do not know how that may be, said Harry, looking foolish. I tell you, I know she will marry, Mr. Clavering. I told Edward so yesterday. He merely smiled. I would hardly do for him. She has so much will. Edward has a will also. Is there talk of her marrying him? Of her marrying Count Pateroff? The man who's associated with her to ruin her name? All men have a will, I suppose, said Harry. Ah, yes, but this is a difference. A sum of money is down if a man is to marry is better than a widow's dower. If she dies, you know, he looks so foolish, and she is so grand and will want to spend everything. Is she much older than you, Mr. Clavering? Of course I know Julie's age, though perhaps you do not. What will you give me to tell? And the woman leered at him with a smile which made Harry think that she must be almost more than mortal. He found himself quite unable to cope with her in conversation, and soon after got up to take his leave. You will come again, she said. Do. I like you very much, and when Julie is in town we shall be able to see her together, and I will be your friend. Believe me. Harry was very far from believing her, and did not in the least require her friendship. Her friendship, indeed. How could any decent English man or woman wish for the friendship of such a creature as that? It was thus that he thought of her as he walked away from Mount Street, making heavy accusations with his own breast against Lady Ongar as he did so. Julia. He repeated the name over and over a dozen times, thinking that the flavor it was lost since it had been contaminated so often by that vile tongue. Fight all you like, Tony. Tell us this all you like. We're still going to want Sophie Gordeloup to be in every scene. But what concern of it was his? Let her be Julia to whom she would. She could never be Julia again to him. But she was his friend, Lady Ongar, as he told himself plainly that his friend had been wrong in having permitted herself to hold any intimacy with such a woman as that. No doubt Lady Ongar had been subjected to very trying troubles in the last few months of her husband's life, but no circumstances could justify her if she continued to endorse the false cordiality of that horribly vulgar and evil-minded little woman. As regarded the grave charges brought against Lady Ongar, Harry still gave no credit to them, still looked upon them as calumnies, in spite of the damning advocacy of Sophie and her brother. But he felt that she must have dabbled in very dirty water to have returned to England with such claimants on her friendship as these. And in this, Harry might be a prig, but he's right. Julia should tell Count Pateroff and Sophie Gordeloup, I do not know you. Stop calling at my house. Stop sending me letters. I am not going to know you socially. She should absolutely do that. But she's so lonely. He had not much admired the Count, but the Count's sister had been odious to him. I will be your friend, believe me. Harry Clavering stamped upon the pavement and thought of little Pole's offer to him. She be his friend? No, indeed. Not if there were other friends for him in all London. Sophie, too, had her thoughts about him. Sophie was very anxious in this matter, and was resolved to stick as close to her Julie as possible. I will be his friend or his enemy. Let him choose. That had been Sophie's reflection on the matter when she was left alone. So there you go, ladies and gentlemen. You have now well and truly met Sophie Gordeloup. This horrible, odious, pestiferous little Franco-Pole. So we'll move on to the next chapter, and hopefully we'll enjoy it just as much. So I'll see you all then. Thank you, BookTube.